Murat is with us. Great Jets stock watch piece in today's Athletic. And right at the top of the risers, it's Saku Maenalanen, who was back out there yesterday. I thought it was very important to note about how much shorthanded time he got killing penalties. Blake Wheeler was out there killing penalties too, which was interesting. But in particular, Maenalanen, I mean, how much has he improved his stock within the organization over the first week of camp, Murat? And how do you see things going for him through the rest of camp?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, there has to be a reason that Winnipeg signed him. There had to be a story that leads to them identifying this as a player. On the other hand, he was a complete outsider before this all began. He doesn't have the track record. He doesn't have the relationships. He doesn't have, even a much of an NHL pedigree, because he went back to Finland and the KHL and played for Jokerit and Karpat, I believe, in Finland. So there's a situation where we didn't really know a lot about the player. Day one, he was a force in terms of showing up big, strong, fast, mobile, all the things that you want from a fourth line type player. He, Kevin Stanley, Mikey Eyssimont were a line, and they can really badger anybody. Even at the NHL level, they were a real pain to play against. It was easy to imagine them getting zone time in certain contexts against even good players. You know, you wonder about the offense, you wonder about all that sort of stuff. But that's a really competitive group. I think that puts pressure on a Dominic Toninato type for a job on this team, or perhaps puts pressure and, provides a veteran opportunity, because Maenalanen, I believe, is 28 and Stenlund is 26, that they could be veteran 13th forward type options as well. To see Maenalanen forecheck hard, turn pucks over in the drills in camp, and then have a little toe drag moment, go for the top glove last night, to do 2 minutes of penalty killing. He's a guy that's clearly caught the eye of the coaching staff and all of us who've been observing camp. He's been somebody I've written about a lot. There's a guy who's played himself into the conversation.
Well, and moving on down the list, Mikey Eyssimont, who we just mentioned, was the guy that got the placeholder role for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Had a very strong season in the American Hockey League last year, Murat. And no, while I don't expect him to be on the roster at the beginning of the season, I think he's done enough. And if he can continue the play that he has to open up some eyes, he could certainly be near the top of the list for a call-up, depending on the players that are out. And I don't rule out the fact, he's got a little bit of offensive pop, but certainly can skate. He's a pain in the ass. I would imagine at some point this year, he could be an option for a bottom six role with the Winnipeg Jets, depending on how things go health-wise.
I think that's completely realistic. At the AHL level, he can produce points as well in a sort of a middle six impact role. And he had his best offensive year at the AHL level last year. There's a little bit of that there. At the NHL level, I sort of think of guys a little bit like Matthew Perreault, though without the just fine touch that Perreault had. He would have a little bit more speed, and he would certainly have that motor that doesn't quit. You really get a sense from this guy that he's not going to quit on any play, and that extends shifts in the offensive zone. It knocks down that one extra puck. It adds one extra hit. It creates one extra turnover, and those are things you like from guys in bottom six roles who aren't necessarily going to star in the league. That helps put the puck in good situations. I guess one NHL game last year, I would think he was a reasonable candidate to at least double that this season and move forward. He's not, if he had the wheels of a Brandon Tanev, we'd be talking about a really, really special player to add to that third line, let's say, and you could pencil him in already. What he's really looking for is an opportunity, I think, at this stage. And if he gets that, I think he'll show that you can count on him to play that competitive nature of hockey, night in, night out, shift in, shift out. It's been really fun to watch him compete at camp.
Murat, listen, I think we know the opportunity's there. The spot is there for Cole Perfetti. That was never in doubt. But with that comes, I think, a lot of pressure for a young player to perform and produce in what is all, in all likelihood, a top six role. What have you thought of Cole's camp and his performance in the preseason so far?
It's been so interesting because I've found myself impressed by him in ways I didn't expect to be impressed by him. There are plays that he can make where he slows the game down. He's a tremendous playmaker. He can also be a first shot option and take the puck to the net and make his shots. These are the things that were his bread and butter at the AHL level, and you started to see that just a little bit at the NHL level last year. Okay, great. There's a part of me that wants to just show so much empathy for this player who was hurt partway through last season, who's played in all sorts of leagues over the last couple of years. He's just 20 years old. let's not ask for too big of a ceiling. Just stay healthy, cement your roster spot, and all's well. But then you see in some of the scrimmages where he's going up against a Mark Scheifele or the other veterans at the NHL level, and at the offensive blue line, he's able to track back check on a puck, win that puck, use his body to protect it from a bigger player like Scheifele, and then get the cycle going again. It creates a chance for Blake Wheeler. And the defensive side of the puck, just at that blue line as well, he's also able to take hits to make plays and get the puck going in the other direction. I think we've always known that this player could contribute, when all goes well, when the development continues. He's still just 20 years old. We're all seeing him as a potential top six, perhaps a first line player with top power play time. The skills are there. But if he can win those battles and move the puck in the right direction as well, he might be able to have an impact on puck possession, on what zone the game gets played in, that I didn't necessarily know or feel sure about in the past. I'm leaning really, really big on a few key battles in camp so far, but there's dimension to his game, and to use a word that probably I don't even understand the full value of, but there's dimension to his game that I think is just so exciting for almost surprising reasons right now.
Yeah, and just before we talk about the blue line, obviously Daniel Torgersson was a star last night. I mean, beautiful finish on that second goal. I mean, he had two. We joked that he was halfway to the Hannu Järvenpää exhibition game, 4-goal game. But he and Henri Nikkanen are really interesting players. I mean, they came by. We got a chance last year. We got a chance to see them a little bit at the end of the season with the Manitoba Moose. What have you thought about those two players? Still very young. I mean, sometimes these guys come in and people don't understand or don't realize how young they are. Torgersson's just a 20-year-old. Again, I think these guys are going to be Moose to start off the season, but how much, in your opinion, have either of those players improved their stock within the organization and thoughts of an NHL future in addition to important AHL minutes this year?
Yeah, it's one of those situations where the first-round talents get the hype, but there are other talents in the Winnipeg Jets pipeline. Torgersson had a couple of injury situations over the past couple of years, but remember, he was 41st overall in the Cole Perfetti draft year, and there's a reason that they took him that high in the second round. And there's an offensive ability and an offensive instinct there that goes along with his power forward type style. The thing that I want to say about him, it reminds me of something Nate Schmidt just told us a second ago. He says, about a week into camp, you sometimes see those young players realize how hard this is to do every day, and they run out of gas a little bit. Well, I think Daniel Torgersson has been the exact opposite. I have notes about him on day one being like, okay, yeah, certain Moose, he's going to be a Moose for sure. I'm looking for him to impact the play in some way. It's day one, of course, let's be realistic. But every single day of camp, he's gotten a little bit better. And every single day of camp, I think he's been one of those players that's taken I almost said Dave Lowry, Rick Bowness's lessons forward. And there's one forechecking drill I can remember in particular where Rick Bowness interrupted on Torgersson's route and turned it into a teaching session for everybody. For the rest of the day, Torgersson was a force in turning pucks over in the scrimmage, in the drills as well. And to see him get rewarded, he scored a nice goal set up by Evan Pole in one of the scrimmages, and then 2 goals yesterday, a post yesterday. He was all over it. This isn't the guy who's about to make the NHL, of course. It's just a nice look to see, to remind folks that there's a second wave of prospects that, may project to have NHL futures in them someday as well. Henri Nikkanen I haven't seen as much from, but those two have played a lot together, and certainly the size and, the projected forechecking ability would be there too.
Now, Murat, let's get to the blue line. I mean, we spoke all summer about how crowded it was. Will there be a move made to open up a spot for another young defenseman? That hasn't happened yet, which has made the competition for that 6th spot even, I think, more interesting. I'll just ask you straight up, has Ville Heinola done enough so far through camp and in his performance in the preseason to help his cause for that 6th spot, or has he been falling behind in the race?
Ville Heinola has been a mixed bag for me, and I really just think this is a player that needs to build some confidence at this stage. Under pressure, those types of first passes that he makes are excellent. There are defensemen in this camp who, under a certain amount of forechecking pressure, they're likely to put it off the glass and out, or that pass is going to be a little bit less crisp. Ville Heinola, you pressure him and things go well, but there have been a few moments where he's had time and he's had time to lead a breakout or sort of decide in advance what play he's going to make, where things get a little bit clumsier. And to me, that seems like a confidence thing. It's a timing thing, a rhythm thing. And when you see Ville Heinola dump pucks, in the middle of a breakout, just a clean giveaway to somebody, that just doesn't seem like him playing at his best, the best version of what he does well. At the same time, he gets his goal yesterday. There are productive plays that he makes. I just think that for him to give himself a realistic shot at being the young guy that takes a top six job, we need to see 100% of what he does well a little bit more often. And of course, there's 4 preseason games left. He is a really cerebral player. There's a chance that all those rhythmic things come into place and snap into place for him. But I'm actually more inclined today to say, give this guy until Christmas in the AHL than I was before camp began. And I'm a fan of the player and I'm a fan of puck movers. So the lack of confidence and precision in some of those moments make me think that, he's fallen a little bit behind Dylan Samberg as the most likely guy to take that spot.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. And I mean, it's certainly, listen, it was nice that he scored that goal. I mean, that'll be a bit of a confidence builder, but that was also later on in the game after you mentioned, a turnover and just a few things that didn't seem like he was clicking at with maximum confidence right now. And that's difficult. And then on top of it all, of course, we've talked about the waiver eligibility for other players as opposed to Ville Heinola. And I think at least that right now, that sort of seems the way the tea leaves are reading. Logan Stanley's in a different situation. He played in the first game. I'm not sure how much we want to take from that, but did not have a great game. How much of a dogfight is Logan in right now for playing time, even if he is technically on the roster once they get down to 23?
I think we're getting to the point where he just has to round out into the best version of himself to be sure that he's one of the top 6 defensemen. If his camp continues how it's gone, where whether it's drills or that first half of the game against Edmonton, and the puck's a little bit of a hand grenade under forechecking pressure, he's going to play himself into a situation where Dylan Samberg can take his minutes from him, and perhaps he's looking at the press box from time to time. And we did see just a little bit of that at the tail end of last season. I think that what would be ideal is that one of these guys, Stanley, Samberg, Heinola, somebody steps forward and just makes the statement night in, night out, day in, day out here at camp that, those passes are crisp. The physicality is there. They're jumping up. They're also tracking back. All of the things, whatever the things are that Rick Bowness is asking of them. But the real truth is there isn't a clear-cut answer with either of these players right now. Whoever gets that job in the top 6, we're going to need to show some patience with, because there's going to be growing pains. And to my way of thinking, the way that the puck has sort of fought Logan Stanley so far, if that continues, I have Dylan Samberg above him as well. And even though he hasn't had a perfect camp, he's had a good one and is probably the guy most likely from where I sit to take that job.
Now, I want to ask you about Neal Pionk. Can you mention him in the piece as well? Because, I mean, this is a very different situation. He is going to be on the team. He's going to, in all likelihood, be an important top 4 player. But he's also a guy that I think the Winnipeg Jets as a team need a big, big bounce back season. I mean, the Neal Pionk we saw last season struggled as opposed to the Neal Pionk we saw the previous year, as well as earlier on. What do you make of Pionk's situation, his camp so far, and where he's at a couple of weeks before things start to count for real?
Yeah, I mean, to backtrack, he had 2 straight years as Winnipeg's best defenseman, and it looked like the Jets had stolen a top 4 defenseman from New York, who the Rangers mostly played on their third pair, and it looked like that Trouba trade was, oh my goodness, 100% slam dunk in Winnipeg's favor for a little bit. And I don't know if it's specifically the injury/suspension situation of, I think it was last November or December. I think he took a knee to the head and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if that's the moment at which you say Neal Pionk's, assertiveness or his excellence kind of diminished a little bit through the rest of the season. But there is a sense that, in the back half of that season, his reads weren't as confident. His offensive rushes weren't as impactful. His physicality wasn't as impactful either. All the things that you look for his best version of his game. And I think that his job is assured. He's capable. He'll help the team. But a bounce back to his top form is something that you're really looking for if you want to believe in Jet success. And whereas last year at this time, all my notepads are full of Josh Morrissey did this, Josh Morrissey did that. He's so explosive. This is a resurgent season. And I remember writing a whole column about that. Pionk in his case hasn't shown that same wow or that pop or whatever else that's going to be that, at least to my unprofessional non-scout eyes, I don't see that player taking an enormous leap forward. Maybe he's just not wired that same way. Maybe he is a guy that's going to improve a little bit every day and then arrive by, October 14th, ready to go at his best. But I'm just not sure of it quite yet.
Murat, now, unfortunately, Brad Lambert's been out for the last few days. I know he's returned to practice today. I thought he looked really good in the first few days. I mean, he's got that speed and he was able to make a few impactful plays, through scrimmaging. Just thoughts on Chaz Lucius and Brad Lambert. I mean, the 2 first-rounders. And do you have any more thoughts on where Lambert might most likely end up this season playing, assuming that at some point he'll be released from the big club and have the options of going to the Western Hockey League or the American Hockey League?
Yeah, you know what? Right before I connected, the first time I had watched a little bit of Lambert on the ice, and that skating that everybody says is special. I mean, it's special. It's really quite something. And I think that when you have, whether it's whether it's enormous size, whether it's a crazy shot, whatever it is, when something in the toolkit is that exceptional, even compared to the professionals and the NHL players, you're always going to be able to stand out in a certain way. And on days like this, and the guy was flying. He looks like he could be an offensive dynamo at some point. I think where he'll need to learn is the professional nature of the game and playing night in, night out, commitment to the defensive side of things. Choosing when all of those sorts of things that young players go through, and especially ones that were so highly touted as he was, and then had a little bit of a tough year last year. I see him again. I think the place for him to learn the most and become the best is with the Manitoba Moose this season. And we've seen 19-year-olds go to the Moose and have tremendous success. I would hope for the same thing for Chaz Lucius, who, he doesn't have skating that is, better than a lot of these NHL guys necessarily, but he looks completely in line with what you'd expect at his stage at 19 years old, where when he does get into positions and when he does get a little bit of an offensive cycle going, there are things that he does that are special. The speed that he takes the puck to the net, the assertiveness, the way that he reads plays and then chooses the most dangerous option so quickly. I mean, you can see a really high-end offensive brain there. And in both guys' case, I really hope that they go to the AHL, and I hope that they get big minutes and see the ups, see the downs, get counted on. Have nights where they're not the best player, have nights where they are, amongst the best players, all of that sort of stuff. I think it would be an exciting time for Manitoba.
Murat Atesh of The Athletic with us live from the Iceplex as the Jets training camp continues. Jets in Montreal tomorrow night. Pierre-Luc Dubois leading a younger roster into that game. And then the team's back at home Saturday night with the Dale Hawerchuk statue unveiling before the Saturday night game. Where's Mikhail Berdin? We couldn't help but notice he wasn't on either of the groups today. We've talked about the fact that it is crowded. I kind of have the feeling that Holm and the Finn are going to be the guys with the Moose that they'd like to see playing the more. Have they said anything about that? What's going on?
That's a great question. And there's a chance that as of this moment, the next media sessions have begun and maybe a coach has spoken to that. There's even a chance, though it seems unlikely, that maybe there was some kind of typo and he was out there, or I'm not sure. In that second group or what have you, I only caught a few minutes of it. And whatever the situation is, whether it's injury, whether it's just a rotation, whatever's going on, I think the truth is he has not been as good as his competition so far at camp. And again, if I'm not a scout, I'm definitely not a goalie scout, but every now and again you call some things right. We identified Laurent Brossoit as having a strong season a couple of years ago. And Berdin, I don't think is there. If you're looking for a standout, it's Oskari Salminen so far amongst those young guys, which could create a bit of a three-headed goalie monster in Manitoba, or maybe, I would not have considered Mikhail Berdin as an ECHL goaltender. And, does he, I don't know what his future is right now. And it's possible I'm completely overstating the degree to which the two other guys have passed him, but it's something that I'd be a little bit concerned about right now.
Well, for sure. And I mean, just thinking back to last season, I mean, there was always the highlights of Berdin. I mean, with some of the crazy things that he does, but he didn't stop enough pucks, as far as, earlier on. And I'm not sure that they have the confidence that that is going to be a guy for them in the National Hockey League in the future. And, every start and every minute of playing time is valuable when you're trying to develop goaltenders, the way the Jets did with Connor Hellebuck. So that'll certainly be something that we'll be paying attention.